is making a comeback.
It's hard to believe, but the Iowa caucuses are just around the corner. This signals the official kickoff of election 2020. So what's the political meaning of Iowa, both historically and in this election? We'll get to that with our expert analysis from our LibertyNation.com panel. But first, let's look at the numbers. Former Vice President Joe Biden is the man to beat according to the Real Clear Politics average. He has a 3.7% lead, standing at around 21%. But nipping at his heels is Bernie Sanders with 17.3% and Elizabeth Warren with 16.7%. Perhaps the real upset could occur between Warren and Mayor Pete, who is dangerously close to Warren at 16.3%. Could Buttigieg come in third and knock Warren down a peg? Let's ask our panel. Joining me today is Tim Donner, Washington political columnist.
Hi, Lisa.
National political columnist Joe Schaefer.
Hello, Lisa.
And Liberty Nation's chief political correspondent, Graham J. Noble.
Good afternoon, Lisa.
So, gentlemen, we're here to talk about Iowa today. Tim, I'm going to let you start. When did the Iowa caucuses kind of become a big thing?
Well, basically, no one had heard of the Iowa caucuses before 1976, when a guy named Jimmy Carter decided that was the way for him to get a big splash early on. He won the Iowa caucuses, and then, of course, went on to win the presidency. Before that, the New Hampshire primary had always been the first contest, but now it's Iowa. And the Democrats have been successful in nominating someone who won in Iowa. In other words, Iowa makes a big difference, not as much on the Republican side.
All right, Joe, do the Iowa winners usually go on to win their party's nomination?
From looking back in previous results, I didn't see a clear pattern in that. You had Dick Gephardt winning in 1988. Bob Dole crushed George H.W. Bush in 88. Pat Robertson finished second. So not always, but yes, it helped Carter. It helped John Kerry. It's helped several candidates. So, but it's not definitely going to elevate you all the way.
All right, Graham, does a caucus rather than a primary, as in Iowa, favor any political particular candidate this year?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Lisa, and I'm not sure that there's a definite answer to that. I think it's debatable. I really don't know. I mean, there's so much more. The Iowa caucuses, because the way they're done, gives the opportunity for a lot more competition. So I guess you could argue that the winner of the New Hampshire primary, which is the first actual primary as opposed to caucuses, the winner of that this time around may in fact be on a good footing.
All right, so Tim, do you see this as a big year for the Iowa caucuses?
Well, it could be because it's a four-person race at this point. It's extraordinary, really, how close the race is. So it's going to help set a tone and give someone a big advantage and give them some pad room to lose a couple of contests after that. I would say the candidate that I suspect will have the biggest advantage is Bernie Sanders, because he has the most committed supporters. And of course, in a caucus, you get the most involved, most activist of your supporters who come out to caucus, and Bernie's supporters are the most unshakable of all of them.
Right. So, Joe, I mentioned in our intro that Elizabeth Warren and Pete Buttigieg are basically within just a couple fractions of a percentage point. If Buttigieg does overtake Warren in the caucuses, what do you think that really means?
Not a whole heck of a lot for Warren. It would mean a lot more for Buttigieg. It would be very good for him. I think this caucus it's about getting on the scoreboard. To me, it's a top tier of three with Sanders, Biden, and Warren, and they're all going to get on that scoreboard. So Klobuchar and Buttigieg, how they do here. If they do well, that is definitely going to help them moving forward. If they don't do well, that could actually be significant. That's the only way I think Iowa's going to be significant, if neither of them does very well.
Graham, do you agree?
Yes, I guess I do to a certain extent. I mean, I think these the early voting states are going to be, they're all going to be shared by essentially the top 3 or 4 candidates. And I think unless that changes, then as we go into Super Tuesday, the field is going to be narrowed considerably, I think.
Tim, how important are the Iowa caucuses compared to, say, the New Hampshire primary?
Well, it depends on the given year, but you get a pass on not doing well in New Hampshire if you've done well in Iowa. But again, I would stress the point that it's such a close race between the top 3 or 4, and nobody's prepared to say that any of them have an advantage at this point. So I think getting a victory in Iowa inoculates you against any failures that you might have shortly thereafter, leading up to the big day, which is Super Tuesday, March 3rd, when 14 states will have contests, and that will go a long way to deciding the nomination. And if Mike Bloomberg sees a field that has been divided by multiple victors in the first few races, that could be his big opportunity to pounce, because he's carpet bombing those states with ads.
Right. Well, it's interesting that you brought that up. I was just going to ask you, Joe, what about the people who are not competing in these 2 states? Do they have a lane?
Oh, yes, they do. I like how Tim answered that. I thought that he really nailed it. I don't think Iowa and New Hampshire are as important as they were 30 years ago, for the very reason that we're going to make this the most important thing in the world for 24 hours, because that's what we all do today in the internet age, the 24-hour news cycle. I think that actually hurts the prestige of Iowa and New Hampshire, because we'll get all excited and then we'll move on to the next thing. So the people who are kind of lying in wait, like Bloomberg, put all his cards on Super Tuesday, I don't think they're going to be hurt too much by skipping Iowa and New Hampshire. Super Tuesday is in March. It's early. I think that is going to be where we really see some movement in this Democratic primary.
Graham, what happens if there are multiple winners in our first contest before Super Tuesday? Let's say Biden takes Iowa and Bernie takes Iowa and Biden takes New Hampshire, or vice versa. I mean, what does that essentially mean rolling into Super Tuesday?
Well, I think it could keep the competition going, if you like. I mean, I think it basically keeps the field wider. For instance, I think if maybe only 1 or perhaps 2 of the top candidates essentially, for want of a better term, cleared the table, if you like, in terms of winning all of the early voting states, I think it would have the effect of putting a severe damper on the campaigns of the other candidates. Whereas I think if you come out of the early voting states with maybe 4 different winners, I'm not sure that's possible, or rather I'm not sure it's going to happen, but if you come out of the early voting states with 4 different winners, or maybe 3 different winners, I think that gives the other candidates, the second tier candidates, if you like, the impression that, well, this race is still up for grabs, so let's hang on till Super Tuesday.
All right, lightning round, gentlemen, to close us out. Who wins Iowa and why? Tim, we'll start with you.
I'm going to guess Bernie Sanders again, because of how committed his supporters are, and because he can draw support from the other radicals who are generally the ones that show up for a caucus. So I say he wins. Bernie Sanders wins Iowa.
Go.
I'm going to say Bernie Sanders as well. My surprise would be one of either Buttigieg or Klobuchar is going to underachieve, and it's going to hurt them moving forward. That's my bold prediction.
Graham.
I'm going to say Bernie Sanders is going to win Iowa, but I think he will be the first Democratic candidate since before 2000 to win the Iowa caucus and not go on to win his party's nomination.
All right, I am going to go out on a limb here. I say Joe Biden is going to win Iowa, and the reason is because I think the caucuses are filled with, in Iowa, the old political establishment, and I think that is right in Joe Biden's lane. Thank you very much, Tim Donner, Joe Schaefer, and Graham J. Noble. Join us again for another Election 2020 panel next week on Truth TV. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief of LibertyNation.com.
Truth is making a comeback.